Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Reading Madhya Lila 12, the cleansing of the Gundicha temple, 71 through the end of the chapter. That's what I got. Translation: after taking his bath early in the morning, what? All right. Good to know. Chapter 12, the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. In its Amrita Pravana Bhasya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes this chapter as follows. The king of Orissa, Maharaj Prataparudra, tried his best to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Nityananda Prabhu and the other devotees informed the Lord about the king's desire, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not agree to see him. At that time, Sri Nityananda Prabhu devised a plan, and he sent a piece of the Lord's outward garment to the king. The next day, when Ramananda Roy again entreated Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see the king, the Lord, denying the request, asked Ramananda Roy to bring the king's son before him. The prince visited the Lord dressed like a Vaishnava, and this awakened remembrance of Krishna. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivered the son of Maharaj Prataparudra. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the Gundicha temple before the Rath Yatra took place. He then took his bath at Indradumna Lake and partook of prasad in the garden nearby. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed the temple of Gundicha, a Gaudiya Vaishnava washed the lotus feet of the Lord and drank the water. This incident is very significant, for it awoke within the devotee ecstatic love. Then again, the son of Advaita Prabhu, named Gopal, fainted during kirtan, and when he did not come to his senses, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu favored him by awakening him. There was also some humorous talk between Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu during prasad. Advaita Prabhu said that Nityananda Prabhu was unknown to anyone, and that it was not the duty of a household or Brahmin to accept dinner with a person unknown in society. In answer to this humorous statement, Sri Nityananda Prabhu replied that Advaita Acharya was a monist, and that one could not know how his mind could be turned by eating with such an impersonalist. The conversation of these two Prabhus, Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu, carried a deep meaning, and that only an intelligent man can understand. After all the Vaishnavas finished their luncheon, Swarup Damodar and others took their prasad within the room. Sri Nityananda Prabhu took great pleasure when he saw the Jagannath deity after the period of the deity's retirement. At that time, Lord Chaitanya was accompanied by all the devotees, and all of them were very much pleased. There's a little bit of a backstory about the Lord coming, before the carts come into the temple. They pause before going to Gundicha temple. The carts wouldn't move. The king had his elephants, all the men controlling the elephants with their goads. They couldn't get the cart to move. And it was at that time that Lord Chaitanya stepped forward and he put his head on the back of the cart and he pushed the cart the rest of the way to the Gundicha temple. Text number 71.
What do you want to say?
Oh. Translation. In this way, the Lord passed some days in great jubilation. Then the car festival of Lord Jagannath approached. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first of all called for Kashi Mishra, then for the superintendent of the temple, then for Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Then these three people came before the Lord. He begged them for permission to wash the temple known as Gundicha. Purport. The Gundicha temple is situated 2 miles northeast of the Jagannath temple. At the time of the Rath Yatra festival, Lord Jagannath goes to the Gundicha temple from his original temple and stays there for a week. After 1 week, he returns to his original temple. It is understood by hearsay that the wife of Indradyumna, the king who established the Jagannath temple, was known as Gundicha. There is also mention of the name of the Gundicha temple in authoritative scripture. The area of the Gundicha temple is estimated to be 288 cubits by 215 cubits. The main temple inside is about 36 cubits by 30 cubits, and the kirtan hall is 32 cubits by 30 cubits. So it's said that Gundicha, who is the wife of King Indradyumna, who commissioned the deities to be carved, when at her insistence there were no more sounds of carving or work going on by the architect. Open the door, I think they're done, there's nobody here. She got a peep of Lord Jagannath at that time, and she became enamored, and it was she who commissioned this temple to be built. So this becomes the summer home for Lord Jagannath. It takes 1 day for him to go from Jagannath Puri to Gundicha temple. This becomes the destination. And this is Vrindavan. This temple is so beautifully decorated and so wonderfully designed by Gundicha, with beautiful gardens, that this was Vrindavan. This was where the Lord went to, Lord Chaitanya went, Lord Jagannath went, where Lord Jagannath went to have these pastimes of Vrindavan. There are beautiful gardens there. There was picnics that happened in these gardens. And one of these gardens, by the name of one of our wonderful devotees here, is the name Aitota. This was the name of one of the gardens, and Lord Chaitanya used to stay there and picnic there, and there were many pastimes in this garden. Upon hearing the Lord's request for them to wash the Gundicha temple, the Pandicha, the superintendent of the temple, said, "My dear sir, we are all your servants. Whatever you desire is our duty to perform." Translation: The king gave a special order for me to do without delay whatever your lordship orders. Translation: My dear Lord, washing the temple is not service befitting you. Nonetheless, if you wish to do so, it is to be accepted as one of your pastimes. Translation: To wash the temple, you need many water pots and brooms. Therefore, order me. I can immediately bring all these things to you. So Prabhupada says in a lecture at one time, he says that there were no hoses, to bring the water from the tank. Interesting, hoses, we're used to these. So everything was done by buckets. The famous water tank that is still there was all by fire bucket brigade, passing the buckets down to the temple, big heavy buckets of water that were used to wash the temple. And Srila Prabhupada says that at one point, and he's talking about Gundicha temple, he says, not exactly a temple, more like a house, he says. So it's not officially the other time of the year besides when the Lord comes, there's not anything going on at this temple. Who's been to Gundicha? Have you been to Gundicha? You've been to Gundicha? Yeah. Wow, wonderful. Yeah, the destination, the end of the one day to go to Gundicha, 7 days at Gundicha, and 1 day back to Puri. As soon as the superintendent understood the desire of the Lord, he immediately delivered 100 new water pots and 100 brooms for sweeping the temple. It's not very big. It's not a big temple room. Translation: the next day, early in the morning, the Lord took his personal associates with him, and with his own hand smeared sandalwood pulp on their bodies. He then gave each devotee a broom with his own hand, and taking all of them personally with him, the Lord went to Gundicha. It's said at this temple that the flag flies in the opposite direction of the wind, and that there's no shadow. The temple casts no shadow at any time of the day, which is unusual. Translation: in this way, the Lord and his associates went to cleanse the Gundicha temple. At first, they cleansed the temple with the brooms. The Lord cleansed everything inside the temple very nicely, including the ceiling. He then took up the sitting place, Simhasana, cleansed it, and again put it in its original place. So buckets of water were flying everywhere. I mean, for them to reach the ceiling, and the water coming down, and the ceiling was scrubbed. Because when you clean, you start with the ceiling, because anything that's on the ceiling that's dirty comes down, and it cleans noses. Then the walls, and the last thing is the floor. Translation: thus the Lord and his companions cleansed and swept all the temple's buildings, big and small, and finally cleansed the area between the temple and the kirtan hall. Now in Puri, when this is going on, when the Lord is his 7 days at Gundicha, the temple kitchen in Puri is shut down. Nothing comes out of that kitchen. And at this time, the whole kitchen is redone, rebuilt, repaired, refreshed, and it's all brand sparkly new for the Lord when he returns to Jagannath Puri. So it's kind of like a switch that happens. Indeed, hundreds of devotees were engaged in cleansing all around the temple, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally carrying out the operation just to instruct others. When Srila Prabhupada came to the San Diego temple in 1973, I think was the year, the devotees cleaned everything, and the leftover stuff, you know how there's extra stuff that's left around, they pushed it to the back of the temple. So there was a big pile of everything, that was extraneous in the back of the temple. And then on the front stairs of going up to the temple, they thought, oh, this would be really nice if on the face walls of the stairs going up, we painted Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So they thought that that was a good idea. So when Srila Prabhupada came to the temple, he wouldn't go up the stairs because he wouldn't step over the holy name. So he had to go around to the entrance by the kitchen where everything had been shoved to the back of the temple, and it was like kind of a mess, and it was embarrassing, that we think we can hide this. Also, when I was in San Diego and Srila Prabhupada came to visit there, I was in charge of the Brahmachini ashram, and the temple was a small house. If you've ever been to that old Third and Thorn Balboa temple, Balboa Park temple in San Diego. And Srila Prabhupada I'm down in the kitchen cooking breakfast, and there was no speaker, I couldn't hear class down in the temple. There was another devotee that was there also, cooking with me, and we could hear the kirtan upstairs going on. We could hear the devotees jumping, the kirtan and everything, and then Jaya Radha Madhava, and then it was like quiet. It was quiet, and it's like, why is it quiet? Why? And Srila Prabhupada had, when he was on the Vyasa sign, he requested to use a restroom before he started class. And so the closest room, the closest bathroom that was there was across the hall from the temple room, which was the Brahmacharini ashram. So Srila Prabhupada is there at the temple, and it's like crazy. There's, devotees visiting. Everyone had their bedrolls. I was doing service. I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on. So one of the other ladies went into the Brahmacharini ashram and kind of plowed everything that was in the floor into the closet and like shut the door. So Srila Prabhupada, would not see what was left behind there, and she did a tidy up in the bathroom for a couple of seconds, and so he got up from his Vyasa, and he went into the ashram, and then came out and he gave class. Yeah.
Papa made a statement that he noticed that every time he would go to a temple for a visit, he noticed there always was the smell of fresh paint.
So the comment was made that every time that Prabhupada would go to a temple, every fresh paint was the smell that was always, and sometimes it wasn't dry, right? Sometimes, they're like, oh, I hope he doesn't sit down there, or, at one time there was a bookcase also that had just been varnished, and the books weren't in the bookcase yet, and Srila Prabhupada wanted the books in the bookcase, but they said, Prabhupada, the varnish hasn't dried yet, and he was like adamant that the books be put in the bookcase. But at that same time, when I was downstairs cooking in the kitchen, when Srila Prabhupada came from the top of the stairs and down, he was the first one. There was no one there with him. He got up quickly after the class was over, and left the temple room and started down the stairs. And we knew, when we were in the kitchen, we knew that class had ended because we heard everyone hit the floor, big thud. And so we went, Shadananda and myself, we went out to the door of the kitchen. The stairs came down like this. It was a curved stairwell, went right in front of the kitchen, was here. So we stood in front of the kitchen, and the exit was past the kitchen door. So we stood in front of the kitchen door with our hands folded, waiting for Srila Prabhupada to come down. And he came down by himself. He came down, there was no one else with him. And he came down and he paused at the little, there was a bookcase with some of his books in it, and he paused at the bookcase, and he was looking at the books, and we're standing not 10 feet away, less than 10 feet away, with our hands folded, waiting, and Srila Prabhupada walked past us. We were the only ones that were not attending the class. We were cooking breakfast, doing that service, and Srila Prabhupada walked past us, and he did pranams and went out the door. And then everybody else came down. And if I read. Translation, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed and cleansed the temple with great jubilation, chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna all the time. Similarly, all the devotees were also chanting and at the same time performing their respective duties. The entire body of the Lord was covered with dust and dirt, and in this way it became transcendently beautiful. This reminded me of that part in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna's, has been struck by arrows, and his body looks beautiful because there's the little drops of blood, it's became beautiful. So here the Lord is covered with dust, was just usually a dirty situation or not something very pleasing, but it became transcendently beautiful. At times when cleansing the temple, the Lord shed tears, and in some places he even cleansed with those tears. So Lord Chaitanya is washing the temple and crying, as shedding tears and washing the temple with those tears. Very transcendental. After this, the place where the deity's food was kept, Bhoga Mandir, was cleansed. Then the yard was cleansed, and then all the residential quarters, one after the other. Translation, after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu collected all the straw, dust, and grains of sand in one place, he gathered it all in his cloth and threw it outside. Translation, following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the devotees in great jubilation began to gather straws and dust with their own cloths and throw them outside the temple. Translation, the Lord then told the devotees, I can tell you how much you have labored and how well you have cleansed the temple simply by seeing all the straw and dust you have collected outside. So there was even a contest of who could have the biggest pile of straw and dust. I was just watching something about, there was a competition in a classroom about children they were cleaning, and the one who had the dirtiest cloth was the one that won the prize. So here we have a competition. Even though all the devotees collected dirt in one pile, the dirt collected by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was much greater. After the inside of the temple was cleansed, the Lord again allotted areas for the devotees to cleanse. The Lord then ordered everyone to cleanse the inside of the temple very perfectly by taking the finer dust, straws, and grains of sand and throwing them outside. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all the Vaishnavas cleansed the temple for the second time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy to see the cleansing work. So clean once, clean twice, the finer dust. While the temple was being swept and about 100 men stood ready with filled water pots, they simply awaited the Lord's order to throw the water from them. So now the water is being, the dusting, the cleaning, the sweeping, everything out the door, and water pots being thrown from the ceiling down. The pots are hitting the ceiling, the water is washing down, and then out. What? Did I miss something?
No.
Oh.
I was reminded of a time several years ago when you read the part about when the residences were cleaned. Years ago, they used to have inspections of the apartments. They would send someone around. Hi, Krishna. It just reminded me when you read the part about the residences being cleaned after the temple. Mm-hmm. Years ago in New Dwarka, we would have somebody would be assigned to inspect our apartments, like once a week, something like that. They'd come in and it was kind of like the white glove test, They'd walk around. Nobody had any furniture or anything, so it was a pretty easy chore.
Oh. As soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called for water, all the men immediately brought the 100 pots, which were completely filled, and delivered them before the Lord. So it's Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that is stowing the water pots. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first washed the main temple, then thoroughly washed the ceiling, the walls, the floor, the sitting place, sammasana, and everything else within the room. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself and his devotees began to throw water onto the ceiling, and then when this water fell, it washed the walls and the floor. So everything is marble. This could be done in a situation where everything is marble. Everything would melt if we did here. But yeah, everything is marble. The temples are built from marble. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to wash the sitting place of Lord Jagannath with his own hands, and all the devotees began to bring the water to the Lord. All the devotees within the temple began to wash. Each one had a broom in his hand, and in this way they cleansed the temple of the Lord. So as the water's coming down, they're using the brooms to swish it out the front. Someone brought water to pour into the hands of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and someone poured water onto his lotus feet. The water that fell from the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was drunk by someone who hid himself. Now, they're not mentioning names. Someone else begged for that water, and another person was giving that water in charity. Lord Chaitanya chastised that person that did that within the temple room. After the room was washed, the water was let out through an outlet, and it then flowed and filled the yard outside. The Lord mopped the room with his own clothes, and he polished the throne with them also. In this way, all the rooms were cleansed with 100 water pots. After the rooms had been cleansed, the minds of the devotees were as clean as the rooms. Cleanliness is next to godliness. The first principle in deity worship, cleanliness and punctuality. So, keeping ourselves clean, our rooms clean, our cloth clean, the temple clean is the first principle of devotee service. When the temple was cleansed, it was purified, cool, and pleasing, just as if the Lord's own pure mind had appeared. So thus, we're ending there, that chapter. I have a memory of Rath Yatra that I attended in 1974. It was the first Rath Yatra that I had ever been to. I was a new devotee. I didn't know a whole lot about what was going on. It was San Francisco, 1974. Jayananda was there, Madhavisa was there. Bhaktidas had just become temple president. I had put my bank book in the temple safe for safekeeping. And Bhaktidas approached me and said, "Can you give your money that you have?" It was $300. It was all the money I had in the world. And he said, "Can you give your money to the temple for this festival?" And I gave it. That was my surrender, my surrender to the temple. But Bhaktidas spent $2,000 for advertising for this temple. The Rath Yatras that had been previous, they were kind of going, it was good and then lesser, and so he spent $2,000 and hired an advertising agent for this Rath Yatra festival, and he said it was the best money that he ever spent because they got airtime on radio, they got billboards on buses, they got billboards, and they got the sides of buses plastered with, the invitations for the Rath Yatra festival. Jayananda went up into the hills that were overlooking the freeway, and he had bags of lime. And if you put lime on grass, it burns it. And so he poked a hole in the bags, and he wrote Hare Krishna Festival on the sides of the hill, so everyone in the freeway could see this advertisement, free advertisement, in the hills of San Francisco above the freeway. It was pretty cool. And I didn't really know what was going on. I was a new devotee. I barely knew how to put on a sari. But I just knew I was cutting up a lot of vegetables. And pretty much every day, nonstop. And when I went to the festival, I drove to the site with Saranam, Bhaktadas's wife. I drove to the site and then we walked back to the festival. And I had no clue. I hadn't seen the carts. I didn't know what was going on. Like, you know, nobody really told you a whole lot, you know? And didn't know really what was going on. But I remember looking back towards the chariots that were coming, and they looked like ships on dry land. The canopies were billowing, and that's what I thought, ships on dry land. The canopies were billowing like sails. It was huge. There was a huge amount of people there. Srila Prabhupada was there. He rode on Subhadra's cart. And I remember looking at the carts and saying, you know, I thought this was some kind of rinky-dink operation. I had no clue, you know. I thought, you know, there were a few devotees with mixed-matched thoughts, and, you know, we had a temple, and but I came back to when I saw the temples coming, and I went, oh my gosh, the Hare Krishnas did this. And I thought, I'm a Hare Krishna. Not like that. So anyway, as I'm approaching the carts, and I didn't find out the purport to this, you know, this incident that happened until many years later. As I'm approaching the carts stopped. And I was in front of the first cart, Jagannath's cart. Jagannath's? The first cart, anyway. And I looked up at the cart, and I saw a peacock feather floating down, like so. All right, I'll be sure that I'll speak into it. I saw a peacock feather floating down like this, and I bent down to pick it up. And when I picked it up, right in front of me, close like this, was 2 feet in a cane, 2 feet in a cane, 2 feet in a cane. Srila Prabhupada was stepping there. And he was all alone. There was nobody with him. And at first I thought, oh, I'll give him the peacock feather. But then I became a little bit reluctant, shy. But I'm holding the peacock feather and watching him go by. And there were no devotees with him. He was alone. And I was like, wow. And many years later, when I heard Following Srila Prabhupada Memories that Yadabara did, Kamadaki says, Srila Prabhupada was riding in Subhadra's cart and he held up his hand like this for halt, you know? And he held up his hand for stop. And everything stopped. All the devotees, thousands of devotees stopped with just the movement of his hand, like this. Everything stopped. And Srila Prabhupada had to answer a call of nature. So he got down from the cart and he started to walk into the little forest that was there in Golden Gate Park. And the devotees started to follow him. But Prabhupada was like, no, you stay here. So he went into the forest, and then when he came out, he came back up and he got on the cart, and then he made a motion with his hand, just like with 2 motions of the hand, everything stops. With another motion, forward motion, everything continues. With 1 motion of his hand, controlling thousands of devotees and people and the carts and everything. So that was my first Rath Yatra, and wonderful memory that I have. I don't have the peacock feather anymore, but I always think that it was Lord Jagannath that made me make a bow down motion by picking up the peacock feather, because on my own I would not have known to make any kind of obeisance or bow as Srila Prabhupada went past. Anyone else have any comments, questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for going over this chapter with us. It's absolutely beautiful. I was struck by Lord Chaitanya. He used everything he had in this service. And in cleansing the mind, we have to use everything we have because it immediately gets dirty again. It's just like him cleaning the temple twice. But when we give everything to Krishna, I'd never known how small Gandicha temple was. And the fact that they had 100 water pots, 100 devotees on standby, 100 brooms. Not even sure you could fill that, there'd be too many people using all those things in that one space. But when we give our resources to Lord Chaitanya to use in service, they get used most efficiently. They get used to the best of their ability and for the highest benefit of everyone involved. Mm-hmm. And then in that way, it wasn't just Lord Chaitanya, going through the motions of cleansing the mind. He was cleansing everyone in that situation. Mm-hmm. And so it's just this beautiful reminder that when we give our service directly to Lord Chaitanya, he knows how to best make use of it and benefit everyone the most.
So by hearing these pastimes, our minds also become cleansed and purified. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.